for 10 years like you did last time. And if you would give it back to us at some point, that would be great. Good morning, everybody. My name is John. For those that don't know me, for those that do know me, my name is still John. And I'm very thankful to be asked to preach here this morning. This is my first time doing it here at Stenhouse, and you may be about to witness something historic, because depending how it goes, this could also be my last time. We hope not. So today we're going to look at Exodus chapter 4. Every kind of sermon you go to, someone gives it a title, so I've titled this one God's Calling today. And before I go on and give some spoilers as to what the chapter is, I'm going to invite Emson up, who's probably got the best voice in the church, to read it out to us. So let's give Emson a round of applause.
Amen. Anyway, today's reading is coming from Exodus chapter 4, verse 1 through to the last bit. It reads, Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Then the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was leprous like snow. "Now put it back into your cloak," he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, "If they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground." Moses said to the Lord, "Oh Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Oh Lord, please send someone else to do it." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you to speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so that you can perform miraculous signs with it." Then Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Let me go back to my own people in Egypt to see any of them are still alive." Jethro said, "Go, and I wish you well." Now the Lord had said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who wanted to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and sons and put them on a donkey and started back to Egypt. and he took the staff of God in his hand. The Lord said to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord said. Israel is my firstborn son, and I told you, let my son go, so that he may worship me. But you refuse to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son. At a lodging place along the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. And touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. At that time, she said, bridegroom of blood, referring to the circumcision. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the desert to meet Moses. So when Moses and the mountain of God, so he met Moses at the mountain of God and kissed him. Then Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say, and also about the miraculous signs that he had commanded him to perform. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. Thus is the reading for today.
That was a shift. Well done. Thank you, Emerson. I feel like we could probably just close in prayer now and leave it there. But where were we? So Exodus. So yes, last week we had Thomas who spoke about encounter, about how faith in God comes from a real, genuine encounter with God. And that encounter changes the direction of our lives. And then after that, we had Claudia, who spoke about the importance of God's timing. So if we apply those two things that Claudia and Thomas spoke about last week to this passage, when you take God's encounter, God's timing, it creates this moment that is God's calling. So here we have Moses. He's fled Egypt. He's 80 years old. He's now married with kids. And he is living the life of a shepherd. And also probably living in a culture of Midianite culture, a culture that worships and looks to different gods. And then he is out working. He sees this burning bush. There's your encounter. Is that your encounter? Yeah, that is your encounter. It happens 40 years after he's left Egypt. There's your timing. And then the bush speaks. And there's your calling from God. So the three things coming together. Now, when it comes to calling, if I was to be completely honest, I've kind of struggled with the concept of calling throughout the years. I've also been slagged off about that image, saying that it's culturally relevant for about 20 years ago. But anyway, I've struggled with the concept of calling. I would find it slightly tricky when people would say, oh, God's called me to do this, or God's speaking to me about this, and not out of a position of jealousy, but out of a position of frustration. Like, I would have loved God to speak to me, or ask me to do something. I'd be praying, God, send me. I'd love to do this. I can go anywhere. What do you want me to do? But it would literally just be silence for me. And I would also struggle to, how to explain the still small voice of God. I would struggle to actually believe is possibly God, and not just words that were being made up in my head and me kind of creating my own path, but actually having the full trust that God is speaking to me. So I guess it kind of led me down this question of, well, what does it actually mean? Does God's calling actually mean? And there's this guy called Peter Enns, and he's got this really cool job title, biblical scholar and theologian. I feel it's a little bit cool. He wrote this. Is that big enough? Yes. So this question about what is God's calling can be addressed in two different ways, or two different levels. God calls us as sinners into his kingdom. Having done so, God calls each of us to some kingdom service. In other words, God's call concerns salvation and vocation. So I'm going to try and refer to salvation and vocation throughout the rest of this passage. So if we kind of think about the passage we've just read, the very first part, I think, or I wonder, if we're actually witnessing both God's call to salvation and call to vocation to Moses at the same time. So if we repeat a little bit of who Moses is in this moment, he has been living with a Midianite culture. Fundamentally, when he grew up as an Egyptian prince. And now he is walking around in the middle of the desert as a shepherd, not living in a way that the Israelites would have been expected to live. So the encounter, the burning bush, the first chat to Moses is his call to salvation in, I guess, the Old Testament context. And then his call to vocation through him being asked to help God go and release his people from Egypt. So we then read on a little bit that Moses isn't too keen on this, though. But this isn't like this is a common historical issue amongst those who are being called to God's service. Some of the the Old Testament big hitters, I should say, have struggled with this. One who was called to God's service literally ran away, Jonah. We also have another one that kept asking God for signs over and over again to repeat, is that actually what you're saying? Are you truly saying that to me, God? In Gideon. And then we have Isaiah, who also fundamentally just says, I can't do that. I just can't do that. But Moses is really interesting because although he falls in line with those guys in terms of his initial response, he actually makes God angry in the midst of his response. So if we look at what Moses is saying and his response, and the first, I've kind of broken them down into 3 excuses. So everyone's still with me? Have I lost anyone in the room still with me? Great, cool. So Moses' first reply, or what I call excuse number 1, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, Lord, the Lord did not appear to you? I think we can break that down into Moses saying, I'm not the right person, or I'm not good enough for this job. So I'm going to repeat a little bit. I think this is maybe a valid point for him. If we look at it again from the Israelite leader's perspective, Moses is not a credible guy to kind of come forward and say, hi, God spoke to me, I'm here to rescue you all. Repetition, Egyptian prince fundamentally, living in a different culture that's not an Israelite culture. He also was a murderer. He also was a hypocrite in the sense that he tried to break up a big fight previously. And fundamentally, he's just not an Israelite. So in a sense, and I'm saying fundamentally a lot, I'm sorry, but the Israelites would have struggled with his credibility. I think we can apply that to ourselves. I think too often, like Moses, that we believe that we need to be the exact right person in a specific situation that we may be called to, whether it be called into salvation or called into vocation. We might have this excuse that my life is too messy, or I just need to do this, I need to get everything sorted, and then I'll be ready. But it's important to know that at the moment of that encounter with God, who you are in that moment of the encounter is really important. It's important to know that your background matters, that your story to that point can be used for God's glory, it can be used for your salvation, and it can also be used for the salvation of others. Well, Moses' background of a prince, like an Egyptian prince, didn't convince Pharaoh in the end, a bit of a spoiler alert there. It did potentially have the keys to unlock that moment where he was able to stand in front of Pharaoh to account for the Israelites. I think further, kind of going a little bit deeper into that as to why we feel that we need to be the right person to be able to answer a call that God is maybe placing on our hearts, is that the world places a lot of expectation on us to be and look a certain way, to fulfill certain roles that maybe we are being pushed into within our communities or within society. We need to believe certain things and agree with secular culture. And my big thing is, when did imposter syndrome become such a thing? And I guess a bigger question is, why has imposter syndrome become such a thing? It's because there are expectations on us to be squished into this mold that the world wants us to be. There's this also, if I look back on that, this is not how God sees you. God does not expect you to fit worldly molds. Just like Moses, God is calling you into salvation and into a vocation as you are in this moment, right here, right now. Yes, we have flaws. I have many flaws. I'm sure my wife would love to share some of those flaws. But we do have flaws. However, God calls us from a position of love to lift us up, to shape us and mold us into the child of God that he sees you in through Jesus. So if you can go forward a slide again. I kind of find this little cultural thing a little bit annoying, so I'm pushing into it a little bit more. There's this obsession, I think, that's going around about being the best version of yourself. And the fitness industry, I don't know, does anyone recognize this phrase, or a few nods? The best version of yourself. The fitness industry is all over it. Like, I'll admit, I go to the gym now and then. I try and stay fit and healthy, mainly because I've got 2 boys, and if I don't, they'll run all over me. However, fitness is not going to make me into a better version of myself. God is not going to call me if I'm lifting the heaviest I've ever lifted in the gym, or if my body fat percentage is under 12%. Like, it's just not going to happen. I know you think I probably do have a body fat percentage of 12%, but I don't. I also Googled, just for fun, how to become a better version of myself outside the world of the gym. And I found multiple websites with up to 20 things that I should be doing daily, and that was just one website. And no, it didn't correlate with any other websites. So I could have 60 things I need to do daily to become a better version of myself. I think I kind of just wanted to say to them all to jog on, that that's just impossible. We've got no chance. But it's kind of coming back to this point that God loves us just as you are. You don't need to be a better version of yourself to answer a call of salvation or a call of vocation on your life. Who you are in this moment matters. Don't discard who you are at the point of your encounter. God's timing for you is perfect. So, moving on to the second excuse. So God gives Moses a whole pile of really cool signs and wonders to, help him kind of nail home the point that, yeah, you are good enough. You are the man for this job right now because I've decided that you are. But then Moses' next reply is, Moses said to the Lord, "O Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow to speech and tongue." I think we can sum that up in Moses saying, I can't do it. I don't have what it takes to do this job. So let's get honest with each other just for a little bit. Okay, I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation here. Please put up your hand if you have done any of the following. You have purposely forgotten your PE kits. I know for a lot of you this will be like a couple of years ago. You purposely forgot your PE kits. You purposely forgot your PE kit and then claimed to have a note from your parents saying you were too ill to do PE, which you also forgot. You brought your PE kit but said you were feeling too ill to do PE. You weren't. Thank you, Olive. Olive's the only honest one in the room here so far. Or you hid in the toilets and didn't do PE at all. Hands up if you've ever done any one of those. Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting so many honest people. That's awesome. Okay, so it's evident there's a few of us in the room who have found a certain level of excuse not to do something that you weren't keen on doing. In the wisdom of Egyptians, and powerful in speech and action. So I would be stretching to say that I think Moses is being deceitful here. But what we can, I guess, detect from the text is that Moses is building up a bigger reluctance to, and it's an increasing reluctance to answer the call that God's putting on his life. What Moses is fundamentally saying here, after his first kind of like, I can't do this, is, I hear what you're saying, God. The signs that you've shown me here, the snake, the hands, and the blood, like, they're awesome, they're great, but the plan's not working for me. I'm not really up for this. It's not going to work. What Moses isn't really catching on to here is the plan isn't about him. He's just been asked to come along the journey. The plan is to go out and save a whole pile of people. But if you look at his language here, when the first excuse has gone from what, or like a what, why kind of level question or statement, and now he's going to the grandeur language of, "Oh Lord." So he's kind of like, he's layering on like the kind of the pity, the element here. You can almost like hear yourself sing it to the PE teacher in your pleading teenage kind of voice, like, "Oh, Mr. Bat, I'm so sorry. I can't do PE today because," and then you're entering your excuse. The Lord God, he kind of then has his big mic drop moment here. I feel that this is heavy. The Lord said to him in verse 11, "Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak. I will teach you what to say." Like, I think in the most high level, unbelievable, powerful way, God has literally just said to Moses, "Stop being daft. Off you go now." Like, there's nothing left to really say to that. God is saying he's going to give him everything he needs. He needs nothing. Just let's just get on our way. But I think what we also can maybe take from this is that Moses is possibly displaying a little bit of fear, a fear in failure, I think. Fear and failure in the sense of that he is worried about standing in front of Pharaoh. And whether you believe that he is being slightly deceitful in his ability of speech, I think we'd still always arrive at this point. But this fear of failure, and it happens to us as well, is it actually drives a level of apathy into our reaction of stuff. So we feel that we fear that we're going to be able to do something, so we just sit back and we don't even bother trying. Because if we don't try, then we'll never fail. Fear is a really powerful thing. I'm watching a documentary on Netflix called Surviving Black Hawk Down, and it describes the fear that both the soldiers who were involved and also the local Somalians who were involved felt when their lives were, met with like an instant death. They didn't know if they were going to survive the night. So if we take that as being kind of like high-grade fear, we're not talking kind of high-grade fear here. We're talking low-grade fear, the kind of fear that makes you feel that you're not capable of doing something or answering the call to salvation or vocation that God is putting on your life. It's the kind of fear that makes you worry about what other people think. It makes you question whether you have the ability to do something or whether you're going to be able to change what you might need to change to achieve something. It even might be a slight fear of not having enough time. Like, we're talking like real low-grade stuff that just eats away at you, but it is so powerful. And I think I am, not worried is not the right word, but I'm like kind of almost like bowled away by how powerful the fear of what other people think of us has over us. It's definitely got me in some cases. But this low-grade fear will rob us of life. And as well as it being driven by a level of apathy within us, it then also has this lovely, wonderful ability to breed a certain level of stubbornness in us as well. So we kind of like have this fear that then breeds apathy, but then leads to stubbornness. And it's all seems to be substantiated within ourselves about claims and beliefs that are probably not true, that we believe about ourselves. And then it starts creating such statements which are, "I'm not going to do that." You respond with a, "I'm just not," or "I just can't." There's no substance behind it. We're just caught in this fear of failure. So not only is it God's desire for you to answer his calling, like he wants to give you stuff, or not give you stuff, like, yeah, sorry, Lego, that'd be great. But God wants you to answer his calling. He wants you to answer his salvational call or his vocational call. But not only that, he wants to set you free from this fear that is probably holding you back, that's breeding this apathy and stubbornness. Oh, I've lost my place. So, yeah, I guess, so yes, I'll repeat that point since I've lost my place. But God wants to set us free from our fear of apathy and stubbornness. He wants to take that voice that's in your head that's saying, "I can't," and he wants to remove it and fill it with his voice that says, "You can." He would only know you can because if he's calling you, you know you're able to do it. But if that is you this morning, and you do feel that you've been living under this little kind of constant voice in your head saying, "I can't, I can't, I can't," then I would love to encourage you today to come find someone at the end so that we can pray for you that that voice would go and it would be filled with God's voice instead, that I can, and removing that I can't. And I wonder if maybe there are a few people here who, as I say this, that maybe feeling a little slight tightness in your spirit. There might be that edge of stubbornness that is kicking in that's like, I can't let it go. Again, would love if we could pray for you later too, that we don't want to let that stubbornness settle. Like, please don't let stubbornness win in your life. Moses is beginning to display this level of stubbornness, but please don't let your journey with God be curtailed by this. It may be time to believe what God is saying about you, and what he's saying about you is that you can. So, excuse number 3. It's up, sorry. Oh Lord, please send someone else to do this. So again, some high grandeur-like kind of tone in his voice here, or words that are being used. So here, I think, in some aspect, we might begin to feel a little bit sorry for Moses because he's maybe feeling severe inadequacy. But I'm maybe being a bit harsh. You might think I'm being harsh, but I think we're now seeing the full shutters of stubbornness and Moses just come right down. The apathy is full on kicked in. The stubbornness is like right there, and he's just hands in the air saying, nah, this isn't for me. I'm not doing this. And the reason that I'm going down this line, I think that the evidence here for this is that this is the point at which God gets angry. He doesn't kind of still give him another little sign to say that, no, we've got this. He's angry now. God is not buying the language or the tone of voice that Moses is using. The God that we know that is slow to anger has now had enough. We know also that doubting and questioning God is not problematic. This does not cause God to get angry. And the main piece of evidence to show this is Thomas. So we have Thomas in the New Testament that we now, or we kind of nicknamed Doubting Thomas. Thomas doubted that Christ was resurrected. And Jesus comes in and hits these doubts full on. He addresses them straight away when he meets with Thomas. But he does it with gentle love. Here, Moses is fundamentally just saying no. And God is not happy. The main reason here is not, as we know, the doubts that are coming through. It's not the signs that God has given Moses. It's not the I am going to give you everything you need. It's the fact that Moses here is actually calling out the adequacy of God. Earlier in chapter 3, God says to Moses, go and do these things, and I will be with you. Moses is not holding on to that. He's not believing that. And he's fundamentally saying, God, you are not enough for me in this situation. He's made it all about himself too. Like, in fairness, we can maybe have a little bit of sympathy here for Moses because he feels that he's maybe tried this before. Again, if we go back to Stephen in Acts chapter 7, Stephen describes a moment when Moses kind of tries to break up he kills the Egyptian, but then break up the fight with the other Israelites. Stephen says, Moses was seeing one of them, Israelites, being ill-treated by an Egyptian. So he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. So classic moment where Moses is actually maybe thinking here, God, I've done this before. It didn't work. Why would it work now? So, and I guess timing is a big thing there. If we look at this in our own lives a little bit, if you feel like, maybe speaking to some individuals here in the room, but if you feel like you've tried to answer God's call to salvation on your life before, or a call to vocation before, and you felt like it's fallen flat in its face, that is 100% okay. There is nothing wrong. Like, as I mentioned before, I struggled with the whole calling. And from a vocational setting, I tried to serve in multiple different ways. And it just didn't work. They all just seemed to just kind of peter out into nothing, which I found like really upsetting and frustrating at the same time. I've also seen people give their lives to God and then walk away and head in the other direction. But then they have this moment where they're like, actually, I want to come back. But they didn't believe nor see a route back to Christ because they had done so many bad things. Encounter, timing, and calling. God will provide you with the opportunity to say yes to a call to salvation and yes to a call to vocation. If you're sitting here today and you feel like you've walked away from God and you would like to walk back, like maybe you're experiencing God's timing today on this, and I would encourage you, if you are experiencing God's timing on this, then there's the total ability to say yes to him today. Or, on the other hand, you may feel that you've been burnt by a vocation. It just didn't work out, and now you're kind of feeling a little bit forgotten or not chosen by God. And I would encourage you that that is not the truth, and that's not the case. God sees you, and God also has a plan for you. It might also just be a case of timing. I find that the end of this passage is quite funny, to be completely honest. The discussion with Moses and God kind of ends not with Moses agreeing, but with God just saying, okay, cool, we've had this chat, and I pick up your staff, and off you go. Almost a little bit like the naughty schoolboy, just been doing what he's told. We never actually see or read Moses saying yes. However, the story of Moses becomes this wonderful, incredible prototype of what it is to be a leader. Moses ended up having the most incredible relationship with God in multiple ways. Standing, at the time, he was one of the only people ever to have, he was the only person to have the chance to stand in the presence of God. He was the man that was received the tablets from God. He stood on the top of Mount Sinai as God passed over him. Like, incredible stuff that I guess that we dream of happening to us when we go to heaven. Moses' eventual yes changes a nation despite his initial feelings of inadequacy, fearfulness, apathy, stubbornness, and then potentially being felt like he'd been forgotten. If there's a part of you today that has identified with any of the call of salvation or call of vocation that might be happening in your heart just now, and I would love you to think about, in this moment right now, what would it take for you to say yes to God? We know that God calls you as you are right now. We know that God also says that you can do it and that he will be with you the whole time. And we know that his timing is perfect. God's not going to force you into saying yes. The yes is completely your own choice. But I do believe there are people in the room today who are having a nudge in their heart for a call of salvation, and possibly also having a nudge in their heart for a call of vocation as well. Saying yes to God today might not look like the big grand moment that Moses had up in the mountain with a big burning bush. It might look a lot for you, it might look a lot smaller, a lot quieter, but it is just as important. The question for you is, what